I was speaking for 10 minutes about the Klist sect. That is the official name. I'm butchering the pronunciation on account that I can't speak Russian. It started off as a branch off of the Eastern Orthodox Church in what I could find was the late 16th century. It went on until the early 20th century, in which it officially died. I don't, on account of the whole purging from the communists of all religious sects. Um, hold on, I'm looking at my notes. Um, the estimates for the total members at its peak is somewhere from 40,000 from to 65,000 pre World War One. Those are pretty generous. I think one of the earlier things said it was less than 20,000 though. So there was no census on how many there was. So we're working with pretty rough numbers. And of course, like I said, late 17th um, century it was founded. It really only started getting popularity 18th and yeah, 18th, not 18th, 19th and early 20th century, with its most prominent member being Rasputin. That's usually where most people's minds go when they mention the Klist religion, Klist sect. Their whole worldview splintered very heavily from the traditional Eastern Orthodox practices. They believed they could reach God directly, that they could channel him into their bodies through their practices. Um, the whole kind of similar to some Southern Baptist beliefs that you can talk to God directly, that you pray to him directly. Um, and they believe that through sin, they could accept forgiveness and become more Christ-like, more God-like. Um, with some other things believing that they they had to give up everything in order to become closer to God. All pleasures, all both physical and emotional. So they practice a lot of chastity. Um, the word specifically for this, can't find. It was, oh my god, hold on, ascetism, 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 ascetism. That's what we're going with. Um, they believe that through separation of all that of what they of pleasures they could become holier. As for the ritual practices, they practiced almost like what you would imagine when people think cults, like going out into the woods and chanting and praying, speaking in tongues. They would often strip naked and dance around. There's some speculation, a lot of speculation that they would have orgies like during those practices, which is it's not been proven again because there's not many people who practice that religion left, but that's often times attributed to other people trying to slander the practices that they had to make them seem lesser, as the Klis, again butchering that pronunciation, um, they were heavily persecuted. That's why the reason they would go out to secretive places, middle of the woods, and do these practices on account of constant persecution. This happened even in its founding, and got worse as time went on. Um, hold on, I swear I had something. They denied like all formal churches, all holy texts, and there's no clergy at all within the practice. They believed that it wasn't necessary for them to have multiple guides, as there was only, their prophet of sorts, their god in human form that led them. The creator, Danilo Filipovich, um, he was originally their god, their guide, and when he passed, I couldn't find a specification on how he passed. Um, it went on to his apprentice, and then his apprentice was the new god, the new god in human form, and this continued on and on, and again, they viewed him, they imitated their leader to see how they could become God themselves, and maybe one day they would lead themselves and through the practices become God. They would often practice this during holidays that would be attributed to the Eastern Orthodox religion. So pretty similar to that. Specific Russian Orthodox, I don't. Eastern Orthodox and Russian Orthodox are very similar, but again, there's many differences. Um, and the Russian Orthodox is far more tied into, obviously, Russian traditions and the Tsars and royalty and all of that. Kind of a whole Pope crowns the king, but no, Pope crowns the emperor. But does that mean that the emperor derives his power from the Pope, or does the Pope derive his power from the empire? Kind of thing, you know. Except it's the Russian Orthodox patriarchs and then the Tsar. So it's similar comparison, not exactly exact though. And as for the code of ethics, they had this very um, rigorous form of chastity. There was no copulation allowed even between married couples. It was very heavily frowned upon. How much some of the followers, you know, carried out with this is debated. Some say that they were all very very strict on this. Some say that behind closed doors things happen. Again, the example of Rasputin, he was said to have these orgy parties. Again, is it true? There is some evidence. There is some speculation that it was just slander to make him look worse and rationalize the things that they did to him. Um, there's no real written laws. Again, a lot of it was oral tradition based on the leader, the leader who was originally uh, Danilo. It's heavily speculated that he was the founder of the religion, and that whatever he said went, and so his successors, and that's kind of how it worked. It was very cult like. That's kind of a pejorative term to describe it. I see that, but there's really no other way to describe it. Um, looking through my notes, trying to see if there's anything else of importance. Um, yeah, the order, the country of origin was Russia. I believe it made its way somewhat into the Cossacks. I could be wrong. My geography might be wrong. Um, but I do believe it made it further into the south, more rural areas. It didn't make it to the city again because of the cities were more centralized on Eastern European, not Eastern European, Russian Orthodox beliefs. And again, it's a dead religion. There you won't find many practitioners or any practitioners of it really because of its sinful practices. Um, and again, they were all wiped out and persecuted. Uh, Again, as soon as its founding. uh, yeah, there's the chanting, the dancing, the singing, and again, they would do this until the point of exhaustion, over and over again. It was reported that they spoke in tongues. Again, that could be attributed to it being in more rural areas, so they spoke different dialects, sub languages instead of just Russian, as was common further out because they could have been speaking other Eastern European languages, especially further out west and south. They could be speaking um, native tongues pre Kievan Rus influence. So there's some discreditation to that whole they were just speaking tongues because they were going crazy. But they did believe that through the dancing and the rituals, they could God could inhabit their body temporarily, and they would to to reach that state again, they would have to go through a period of long repentance for the sins they had committed, and I think it's a very interesting aspect, and not aspect interpretation of Christianity. It's very like separated from a traditional point of view of it. You know, the whole to be forgiven, to be closer to God, you have to sin greatly is very interesting. I don't think I've seen any other sect or branch of Christianity really embrace or think of it that way. I think to some extent, you get Italian Catholics have something similar, but that's more of a cultural rather than a theological example. But yes, that's my spiel on the Clis sect. Again, butchering the pronunciation.